The rain tapped against the library window like hesitant fingers, each drop a whisper from a life I thought I'd cataloged away in neat rows of forgotten books. It was late afternoon, the kind where the light slants golden through the stacks, turning dust motes into fleeting stars. I sat at my desk in the back corner, the one with the creaky oak chair that hugs my hips, just right after 40 years of faithful service. My hands, veined like the maps of rivers I'd never crossed, rested on the worn leather cover of a volume on Victorian friendships. Ironic that. The scent of aged paper mingled with the faint vanilla from the candle I'd lit earlier. A, a small rebellion against the chill that had settled in my bones these past months.
I remember the exact moment the world tilted, though it didn't crash. Not then. It was a Tuesday, ordinary as the return card I pushed each week. The phone rang, its trills slicing through the quiet like a thread pulled too tight. I answered without looking, expecting a patron's query about overdue fines or a child's breathless request for the next chapter in their adventure series. But it was Carla's voice, cracked and urgent, pulling me back 40 years in an instant. Sophia, oh God, Soph, I need you. It's bad. The doctors, they say it's urgent. Tests, procedures, I can't. Her words tumbled like loose pages from a binding gone slack, and I felt my breath catch, a small hitch in the rhythm I'd kept steady all these decades. We'd met in the 3rd grade, 2 girls with braids and scraped knees, sharing secrets under the old willow by the schoolyard. Carla, with her wild laugh that could chase away storms, and me, the quiet one who mended the tears in her dresses with stitches as careful as prayers. Through high school heartbreaks, college loans we'd paid off together over late-night teas, marriages that frayed, and divorces that left us stitching each other back up, we were the constants, the ones who remembered birthdays with handwritten cards and showed up at dawn with casseroles when the world grew too heavy. She called me her anchor. I called her my light. And now this, a medical emergency. The word hung in the air, like smoke, acrid and invisible. I didn't hesitate. Why would I? Trust isn't a ledger you balance at the end of the day. It's the air you breathe without question. That evening, in the dim glow of my kitchen lamp, I logged into my retirement account, the one I'd nurtured like a slow-blooming rose, petal by petal, from every skipped vacation and every overtime shift at the library. $25,000. Not a fortune, but enough to cushion the years ahead, to buy quiet mornings with books and perhaps a small cottage by the sea someday. My finger hovered over the transfer button, trembling just once, like a leaf in that rain outside. Then I clicked. Sent. To her account, with a note, whatever you need, I'm here. Always. The confirmation email chimed softly, and I leaned back, exhaling into the silence. The house creaked in response, as if approving. I poured a cup of chamomile, the steam curling up like a promise, and thought of her face lighting up when she saw the deposit. Relief would wash over her, and we'd laugh about it later, over wine and old photographs, toasting to the unbreakable thread between us. But what if the threads we weave in the dark aren't as strong as we believe? What if the one person who knows your every shadow begins to cast their own long and cold across the light you thought was yours? That night, sleep came in fits, the rain a lullaby laced with unease. Dreams of locked library doors and empty shelves where Carla's laughter should have echoed. I awoke to birdsong, the world fresh and unsuspecting, and went about my day shelving returns, recommending romances to the widows who lingered in the fiction aisle. Life, I told myself, has a way of writing itself. Friends like us, we're woven too deep to unravel. Weeks passed in that gentle rhythm. Carla called less. These treatments, they're exhausting, Soph, but your gift, it's a miracle. Her voice brighter each time, threaded with gratitude that warmed me like sunlight on cool skin. I pictured her healing, color returning to her cheeks, that spark reigniting. Then came the first shadow. A letter from the bank, crisp and official, tucked among the seed catalogs I'd ordered for my window boxes. Unusual activity detected on your credit profile. Please review attached statements. My coffee mug paused halfway to my lips, the porcelain warm against my palm. Unusual? I'd paid every bill on time, tucked away pennies like secrets in a locket. I unfolded the enclosures with fingers that suddenly felt too old for such precision, the paper crinkling like dry leaves underfoot. Lines of charges scrolled before me, luxury spa retreats in the Bahamas, designer gowns from boutiques I'd only window shopped at, credit lines opened in my name, thousands upon thousands, blooming like weeds in a garden I'd never planted. The room tilted, the familiar scent of my morning brew turning sour in my throat. Not a mix-up, not a glitch in the system. Her name, scrawled in digital ink right beside mine on reservations for cruises and consultations with surgeons who'd promised to sculpt away the years, plastic surgery, vacations, all while I imagined her in a sterile room fighting shadows I couldn't reach. I set the mug down, the liquid sloshing gently, a small wave against the rim. My hand, steady for shelving tomes and tying bows on birthday gifts, trembled now, just once, as the truth settled like dust after a book falls from a high shelf. Betrayal isn't a shout, it's this quiet unraveling, thread by thread, until you're left holding the frayed ends and wondering how you ever mistook them for strength. How do you mourn a friendship that's still breathing, still calling your name as if nothing has changed? I didn't call her right away, not that first evening, when the letters lay scattered across my kitchen table like fallen autumn leaves, brittle and accusing. The clock on the wall ticked with the patience of someone who knows time heals nothing overnight, its hands sweeping in lazy arcs that mocked my racing pulse. I paced the linoleum, worn smooth from years of bare feet and spilled teas, the cool surface grounding me as my mind spun like a loose reel of film. Each step echoed faintly, a soft thud against the quiet, pulling up fragments of us. Carla and me at 20, huddled in her tiny apartment, pooling nickels for a shared pizza after our shift at the diner. At 35, her hand in mine as we buried her mother under a sky heavy with spring rain, whispering promises to carry each other's grief like shared luggage. Why her? The question bloomed unbidden, a thorn in the soft underbelly of my trust. I'd always been the giver, the one who remembered the anniversaries of losses we'd both endured, who drove through blizzards to deliver soup when her flu turned fierce. She was the spark, yes, but I was the steady flame that didn't flicker, or so I believed. Now, staring at those statements, the numbers blurring through a haze of unshed tears, I felt the first crack in that foundation. My chest tightened, a familiar vice from childhood, when my father packed his suitcase one gray dawn and left without a backward glance. The doors click louder than any goodbye. Abandonment, the psychologists call it later in life, but back then it was just a hole where warmth should have been, one I'd filled with books and eventually with Carla's easy affection. By morning the rain had cleared, leaving the world washed clean, puddles mirroring a sky too blue for the weight in my heart. I brewed coffee strong enough to bitter my tongue, hoping it would steady my voice for the call I could no longer delay. The phone felt heavy in my palm, its screen glowing like an uninvited guest. I dialed her number, the digits muscle memory from decades of check-ins and confessions. It rang twice, 3 times, each tone stretching the silence between us into something vast and unforgiving. "Sophia," she said, already moving into a bright, breathy tone, "clocks that keep time for friendship." "I've been meaning to ring you. These treatments, they're a godsend. Your money? It covered the first round and the relief. Oh, it's like breathing again. How are you, my dear? Tell me everything." I gripped the edge of the counter, the formicite edge digging into my palm like a lifeline. Words clumped in my throat, thick as unset dough. "Carla, I got a letter from the bank. Charges on my credit. Things I didn't. Spas, trips, lines opened in my name." The sentence fractured, each piece landing soft and broken. I waited for the gasp, the hurried explanation, the flood of apologies that would stitch us back. Oh, Soph, that must be some silly mix-up. You know how these banks are. Glitches, crossed wires. Remember that time in '89 when my account showed I'd bought a yacht? We laughed for weeks. Her tone dipped into concern, a practice slide. You're not worrying yourself sick over this, are you? At our age, stress is the real thief. A mix-up. The word landed like a pebble in still water, ripples spreading, but never deep enough to drown the lie. I closed my eyes, picturing her in that moment, curled on her floral sofa perhaps, a glass of Chardonnay sweating on the coaster, her newly smoothed skin catching the light from the window. Plastic surgery. The reports had detailed it, consultations in Miami, follow-ups with a Beverly Hills specialist renowned for erasing the maps of laughter and worry from women's faces. Vacations, too. Cruises to the Mediterranean, where she'd no doubt posted sun-kissed selfies, captions about renewal and second chances, all funded by the nest egg I'd handed over without a second thought. But Carla, I pressed, my voice a threadbare whisper, the dates line up. The transfer I made, it's gone to these. And my identity, it's being used. How? Another pause, this one heavier, laced with a sigh that carried the weight of feigned exhaustion. Sophia, listen to me. You're imagining connections that aren't there. The world's gone digital, full of hackers and errors. Maybe someone got hold of your details through me. God, I hate that I even had to ask for help. But this? It's not me. I'd never. Her voice cracked artfully, a hitch that tugged at the old strings of my loyalty. You're my sister, in all but blood. Don't let paranoia steal that from us. Paranoia. The word stung like salt in a fresh cut, reopening wounds I'd thought long scarred over. I hung up not long after, murmuring assurances I didn't feel, the receiver clicking into place with a finality that echoed in my empty kitchen. The coffee had gone cooled, its surface filmed over like a forgotten pond. I sank into the chair by the window, the one with the faded cushion embroidered with daisies we'd picked together as girls, and let the tears come then, slow at first, tracing warm paths down my cheeks, then in quiet sobs that shook my frame like an old tree in wind. That night, sleep evaded me, chased away by shadows that danced on the ceiling like unspoken accusations. Memories surfaced unbidden. Carla, at 42, tear-streaked after her husband's affair. Me holding her through the nights as she raged against the betrayal. Me at 50, unraveling after my own quiet divorce, her voice on the line like a beacon, promising we'd weather it as we always had. We'd built a fortress of shared hurts, mortar made from midnight confessions and morning coffees. How had I missed the rot setting in? By dawn, resolve flickered tentative as first light. I couldn't let this fester like an untreated wound. The library opened late on Wednesdays, giving me hours to sift through the online trails, bank logs, credit alerts, the digital breadcrumbs she'd left in her haste. Each click revealed more. A boutique hotel in Paris charged to a card bearing my social security number. A deposit into her account mirroring my withdrawal, funneled straight to a surgeon's escrow. No mix-up, no glitch, just a deliberate siphon, my security drained to feed her illusions of youth reclaimed. Anxiety bloomed then, a low hum in my chest that made my hands shake as I poured tea, the steam blurring the page of the novel I'd meant to lose myself in. It echoed the old fears. Father's departure at 8, leaving me to wonder if love was a door that slammed on the unworthy. Mother's slow fade into dementia, her eyes vacant as she forgot my name but clung to photos of a girl who looked like me. Carla had been my proof against that solitude, the one who stayed. Now her absence in truth carved deeper than any goodbye. I needed answers, not echoes. That afternoon, after shelving the returns with mechanical care, the scent of fresh ink a small mercy, I drove to the edge of town, to a nondescript office park where Harlan kept his sign unassuming, discreet inquiries since '95. He was a man in his late 60s, with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like gravel under tires, who listened without interruption as I spilled the tale over weak coffee and styrofoam cups. 40 years, I said, tracing the rim of my cup, the heat seeping into my fingertips. She was family. Harlan nodded, jotting notes in a leather-bound pad, the pen scratching softly. Family's the hardest hit, ma'am, but trails don't lie. Give me a week. I'll follow the money. I left with his card tucked in my purse, the weight of it a talisman against the hollow ache. Driving home, the radio hummed old standards, Ella Fitzgerald croning about someone to watch over me, and for a moment I let the melody wrap around the hurt, a bandage over the bruise. But the questions lingered, sharp as thorns. How deep did this go? And what pieces of myself would I lose unearthing it? Days blurred into a rhythm of vigilance. Carla texted sporadically, cheerful check-ins laced with concern. Heard from the bank? All sorted? Miss our chats, Soph. Each ping twisted the knife, her casual warmth a veil over the theft. I responded in monosyllables, buying time, while Harlan's updates trickled in, emails with attachments, PDFs of transaction histories, photos grainy but damning, a woman with Carla's profile emerging from a clinic in Key West, her arm in a sling from what looked like a fresh lift. Then came the deeper dive. Nights found me at my laptop, the screen's glow casting blue shadows on my face, searching forums and articles on betrayal and long-term bonds. Narcissistic friendships, one headline read, and I clicked, heart thudding like a drum in an empty hall. The words unfolded like a map to madness, the cycle of idealization, devaluation, discard, the gaslighting that made you doubt your own eyes. Stories from women my age, voices fragile with recognition. She borrowed my time, my trust, then my peace. It wasn't just money she had taken, it was the architecture of my certainty, the belief that loyalty was a two-way street. One entry stopped me cold. A psychologist's note on attachment wounds, how early losses prime us for repeat betrayals, drawing us to those who mirror the chaos we know. My father's shadow, elongated across the years. I closed the tab, breath shallow, and reached for the photo album on the shelf, the one with curling edges, filled with snapshots of us, prom dresses stiff with tulle, wedding toasts with champagne flutes raised high, holiday gatherings where her laughter drowned out the clink of silverware. In each, my smile was genuine, unguarded. Now, flipping through, I saw the subtle shifts, her eyes always seeking the next bright thing, while mine held steady on her. Harlan called on Friday, his voice gruff but kind. Got a history, Miss Sophia. She's done this before. Small cons mostly. Ex-husband drained dry 5 years back, claimed it was joint investments. A sister in Ohio cut off after a loan for a business that never launched. Patterns clear as day. I've got affidavits, court filings from a civil suit she settled out of pocket. The pieces slotted together, a mosaic of manipulation I'd been too close to see. Rage flickered then, hot and unfamiliar, warming my chilled core. But beneath it, grief. A vast, quiet sea that threatened to swallow me whole. For the girl who'd shared secrets under willows, for the woman who'd held my hand through storms. Was any of it real, or just a long con wrapped in affection? I confronted her the next day, over lunch at her old haunt, the diner with the checkered floors and pie that tasted of childhood. She arrived late, breezy in a new silk blouse that whispered of my savings, her face a mask of Botox-smooth surprise. "Soph, you look peaky. This mix-up's still eating at you."
I slid the folder across the booth. Harlan's printouts fanned like a losing hand. "No mix-up, Carla. It's you. All of it." Her eyes flicked over the pages, then back to me, widening with theatrical hurt. "This fabrications. That PI of yours, probably some hack with a grudge. Sophia, you're unraveling. All those years alone with your books, it's made you suspicious, paranoid even." The word again wielded like a blade. Diners clattered around us, oblivious, the sizzle of the grill a counterpoint to the ice in my veins. "I trusted you," I said, voice low, the salt shaker between us blurring through tears I refused to let fall. "With everything." "And I love you for it," she leaned in, voice honeyed, hand reaching for mine. "But this delusion, we can fix it. Therapy maybe, for both of us."
I pulled away, the booth's vinyl sighing in relief. Outside, the sun slanted sharp across the parking lot, turning the world gold even as mine grayed. Driving home, windows down, the wind whipped my hair like a flag in surrender. But surrender to what? The lie? Or the truth I'd finally grasped? That evening I called a lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena, recommended by a colleague, who met me in her office scented with lemon polish and resolve. Fraud, identity theft, she murmured as she scanned the evidence with a nod. Civil suit, criminal charges. We build the case brick by brick. As she outlined timelines, depositions, filings, court dates, I felt a shift, small but seismic. The anxiety that had coiled in my gut loosened just a fraction, replaced with something fiercer, self-preservation. Long dormant. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night, the house's creaks a lullaby instead of warnings. But the scars? They lingered, faint lines on the skin of my soul, reminders that trust, once broken, mends crooked. The weeks that followed our diner confrontation blurred into a haze of preparation. Each day, a careful layering of armor against the storm I knew was coming. Elena's office became my second home, its walls lined with law tomes that smelled of ink and precedent, a faint undercurrent of her jasmine perfume cutting through the mustiness like a determined vine. We'd meet after my shifts, the library's hush giving way to the drive across town, streetlights flickering on like hesitant fireflies as dusk settled. I'd arrive with fresh printouts, more alerts from credit agencies, each one a fresh bruise, and she'd pore over them, her pen tapping a rhythmic Morse code of strategy. "You're strong, Sophia," she'd say, eyes sharp behind her reading glasses, as we mapped the filing. "This isn't just about the money, it's reclamation." Reclamation. The word wrapped around me like a shawl on a chill evening, warming the places Carla's chill had touched. We sued for fraud, identity theft, the works, civil claims to claw back every cent, criminal charges to let the law's weight fall where it might. Harlan fed us ammunition, timelines etched in timestamps, witness statements from a teller who'd seen Carla at the bank the day after my transfer, her signature a flourish too bold for subtlety. But Carla didn't fade into silence. Oh no. She countered with the precision of a woman who'd danced this tango before. The first salvo came via certified mail, a cease and desist letter from her attorney, a slick type with a firm in the city, all glass towers and billable hours, baseless accusations from a party exhibiting signs of emotional distress, it read, the legalese curling like smoke. Enclosed was a notarized affidavit from her, tear-streaked in photo form, claiming my recent paranoia stemmed from isolation, perhaps early onset, something unnamed but implied. She painted me as the fragile one, adrift in spinsterhood, latching on to imagined slights to fill the void. I read it at my kitchen table, the paper trembling not from fear, but from a weary sorrow. The photo showed her in soft focus, eyes wide with contrived vulnerability, the kind that had once drawn me in during our shared vulnerabilities. Now it repulsed, a mask cracked at the edges. I folded it away, but the seed took root. Doubt, that insidious weed whispering in the quiet hours, what if she's right? What if the years alone have woven illusions from the threads of longing? Sleep grew fitful, haunted by dreams where courtrooms dissolved into library stacks, judges shelving verdicts like overdue books, Carla's laughter echoing from the returns cart. I'd wake with the taste of copper on my tongue, bitten cheek from grinding teeth, and reach for the lamp, its glow a small island in the dark. Mornings brought chamomile steam and journaling, pages filling with fragmented thoughts, lists of our shared joys to counter the thefts, affirmations Alana suggested. I am seen, I am whole, scrawled in my careful script. But the anxiety lingered, a low tide that ebbed and flowed, pulling at old anchors. Father's suitcase, mother's vacant gaze. They resurfaced in therapy sessions now. The counselor, a gentlewoman named Mira, with salt and pepper hair and a voice like worn velvet. You're grieving a death, Mira said one Tuesday, as rain pattered the window pane behind her, blurring the world outside into watercolor strokes. We sat in her sunlit room, plants trailing green fingers across shelves of self-help volumes, the air scented with lavender from a diffuser that hummed softly. You're feeling unmoored, I said, fingers tracing the armrest's frayed weave, the texture rough under my touch. The words hung vulnerable as exposed roots, and Mira leaned forward, her gaze steady. That's the gaslight's flicker. It dims your truth to brighten hers. But look at the evidence. Your evidence. It's your compass. She handed me a slim volume from her shelf, The Dance of Betrayal, Healing from Narcissistic Bonds. Its cover a swirl of indigo and gold. Read this, not for answers, but for kinship. You're not alone in this waltz. The book became my midnight companion, its pages dog-eared by lamplight, words seeping into the cracks like balm on chapped skin. Stories of women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, mirrors of me, unwinding from ties that bound too tight, emerging scarred but sovereign. Narcissism, it explained, wasn't malice born of night. It was hunger, endless and insatiable, fed by the empathy of others. Carla's patterns clicked into sharper focus, the ex-husband's drained accounts, the sister's silenced pleas, even a college roommate from decades back whose heirloom jewelry had vanished after a tearful loan. Harlan's dossier painted her as a collector of confidences, each friendship a vault to raid when the mirrors grew unkind. Empowered by those pages, I delved deeper, cross-referencing with online archives late into the nights, the keyboard's click a defiant rhythm against the house's size. Forums glowed with anonymous confessions. She was my rock, until I was her stepping stone. And academic papers on attachment theory, their footnotes a lattice of validation. My notes sprawled across journals, diagrams of the idealization-devaluation cycle, circled with the dates of our last decade, her effusive praises during my divorce, souring to subtle digs about my bookish solitude when her own fortunes waned. It wasn't sudden, it was a slow eclipse, her light dimming mine to sustain her glow. The court date loomed like a horizon storm. Papers served with a knock that rattled my doorframe one crisp autumn morning. I signed for them in the chill foyer, the courier's boots leaving faint mud prints on the mat, echoes of the upheaval to come. Pre-trial motions flew like arrows, her team pushing for dismissal on grounds of my mental instability, mine countering with psyche vowels Mira had facilitated. Clean bills of clarity, my mind sharp as the edges of a well-loved novel. Then, the depositions. God, those sterile rooms with their fluorescent hum and notepads scratching like insects in the walls. Carla first, swanning in with her lawyer, her face a testament to the surgeon's art, cheeks lifted to perpetual surprise, lips plumped to perpetual pout. She perched on the chair's edge, legs crossed in nylons that whispered with each shift, and fixed me with eyes that held no remorse, only calculation. Carla and I go way back, she began, voice lilting as if recounting a fond anecdote at bridge club. She's always been imaginative, prone to weaving tales from trifles. That emergency? A white lie to spare her worry over my debts. Debts for caring for my ailing aunt, you see. The money? Meant for her relief fund, but wires crossed in the transfer. As for the charges? Coincidence. Hackers, perhaps, or her own forgetfulness in these senior years. Lies, layered like lacquer, smooth and gleaming. I sat across, hands folded in my lap to still their tremor. The table's oak cool under my elbows. Elena prompted gently, but Carla danced around, her answers a pirouette of evasion. When pressed on the Paris hotel folio, booked days after my wire, charged to my pilfer details, she blinked, all innocence. Must be a common name. Sophias are everywhere. My turn came next, voice steady as I recounted the call, the transfer, the discovery. I spoke of the trust like a living thing, nurtured over decades. The time she'd nursed me through pneumonia with broth and bad jokes, the cross-country drive to scatter my mother's ashes, her hand on the urn as steady as mine. It wasn't just money, I said, meeting her gaze across the divide, the air thick with the scent of her floral perfume, cloying now. She held my eyes, a flicker of something. Regret? Triumph? Before looking away, lashes casting shadows on her flawless cheeks. The stenographer's keys clacked on, capturing it all in black and white eternity. But the real theater unfolded at trial. The county courthouse, a grand old dam with marble floors that echoed our footsteps like judgments unspoken. I arrived early that first day, the air crisp with November's bite, leaves skittering across the steps like fleeing secrets. Inside, the gallery hummed with curious locals, widows from book club, a few reporters scribbling on notepads, the scent of polished wood and stale coffee mingling in the halls. Elena squeezed my arm as we entered the courtroom, its high ceilings arching like a cathedral of justice, benches worn smooth by decades of truths and half-truths. Carla's defense opened with flair. Her attorney, a silver-tongued fox in a pinstripe suit, painting me as a tragic figure, the reclusive librarian, lost in fantasy, projecting her loneliness onto a loyal friend. Miss Hargrove suffers from delusional episodes, he intoned, voice booming off the paneling, exacerbated by isolation and unresolved traumas. What Miss Thompson seeks is not restitution, but relevance. Then came her witnesses, a parade of fabrications that twisted my gut like a wrung cloth. First, a neighbor of Carla's, a mousy woman with nervous tics, swearing she'd overheard me ranting to myself about stolen lives weeks before the transfer. Pure invention, as I'd never met the woman. Next, a so-called therapist Carla claimed I'd consulted years back, testifying to my histrionic tendencies. His credentials later revealed as forged, a favor from some shadowy network Harlan unearthed. The gallery murmured, heads nodding in pitying accord, and I felt the room's eyes on me, heavy as damp wool, weighing my worth. It was in those moments, under the judge's gavel-sharp gaze, a stern woman with silver streaks in her bun and eyes like polished flint, that the old anxieties crested, a wave crashing against my ribs, my breath shortened, palms slick against the rail, visions of father's back turned forever flickering like a faulty projector. Delusional. The label clung, sticky and suffocating, Carla's gaze from the stand a smug benediction. She testified mid-morning, voice quavering just so, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace hanky. Sophia's my dearest friend. This suit, it's her cry for help. I've tried to reach her, but she's barricaded in her suspicions. All I want is to mend us. The lie landed soft, applauded by her planted clock in the back row, acquaintances coached no doubt with scripts and sympathy. Lunch recess found me in a quiet antechamber, Elena pressing a water bottle into my hand, its chill a shock against fevered skin. Breathe, Sophia. Their house of cards is trembling. Wait for rebuttal. Afternoon brought our turn, and oh, how the tide shifted. Harlan took the stand first, his gravel voice cutting through the haze like a plow through fog. He laid out the trails. Bank cams capturing Carla at the ATM, her pin punches mirroring mine. IP logs tying her laptop to the fraudulent applications, timestamps syncing like clockwork sins. Exhibits projected large on the screen, screenshots of her social feeds, geotagged from Bahamian beaches, captions hashtagged blessed, posted while I paced my kitchen in worry. Then Mira, my therapist, in a cardigan soft as her demeanor, affirming my soundness. Miss Hargrove is resilient, insightful. Her reactions stem from trauma response, not delusion. The evidence aligns with her narrative. Her clarity is evident in every session. Cross-examination faltered against her calm, the defense's barbs glancing off like rain on slate. But the pivot, the moment that etched into my bones, was my own testimony, called as the light slanted long through the clear-story windows, gilding the room in amber forgiveness. I rose, legs steady despite the flutter in my chest, and approached the stand, the Bible's letter cool under my palm as I swore truth. Elena guided gently, dates, details, the emotional ledger of our bond. I spoke of the transfer not as transaction, but as sacrament, the click of the button of vow renewed. When her attorney rose, all bluster and implication, isn't it possible, Miss Hargrove, that your solitude has colored your perceptions, that grief for lost loved ones has birthed this phantasm? I met his eyes, then hers, across the well of the court. Carla sat prim, fingers steepled, but I saw the micro twitch, the facade's hairline fracture. No, I said, voice clear as library bells at closing. It's not perception, it's proof. And I turned to the judge, unfolding the therapy notes Mira had sealed, pages of my inner workings, raw and real, time-stamped against Carla's timeline, showing a woman grappling, not grasping at ghosts. This is me, Your Honor. Wounded, yes, but whole. And the woman who betrayed that wholeness, she's the architect of her own unraveling. The courtroom hushed, the air thick with the weight of revelation, sunlight catching dust motes in a suspended dance. Carla's gaze dropped then to her hands, knuckles whitening around that hanky. The defense rested weakly, their tower teetering. Closing arguments wove the threads. Elena's measured fury, a tapestry of facts unspooling Carla's web. The jury, 12 faces, a cross-section of lives etched with their own quiet battles, retired as twilight bruised the sky outside, stars pricking through like hesitant hopes. We waited in a side room, coffee going cold in styrofoam, Elena's hand on my shoulder, an anchor. Hours stretched, the clock's tick a heartbeat in the dim. Then the buzzer, verdict in. We filed back, the gallery swelling with latecomers, whispers rustling like leaves. Guilty. On all counts. Fraud, theft, the civil restitution in full. $25,000 plus damages, a sum that paled against the soul's toll. Carla stood as sentence was read, her poise cracking at last, shoulders slumping, a gasp escaping like steam from a kettle long a boil. Arrest followed swift, cuffs clicking soft in the charged silence, deputies guiding her out, her heels dragging a final defeated staccato.
I watched her go, not with triumph's fire, but a profound ache, the kind that follows a long fever's break. Our eyes met one last time in the doorway, hers pleading now, stripped of artifice. No words passed, but in that glance 40 years flickered. Willow whispers, shared sorrows, the light we'd kindled together now guttering to embers. Outside, night had fallen full, stars a scatter of diamonds on velvet. Elena hugged me fierce, murmuring congratulations, but I slipped away to the steps, breath fogging in the cold. The world felt vast, unmoored, yet free, the courthouse's shadow long behind me. A cab idled at the curb. I waved it down, sliding into the leather seat that smelled of other journeys' ends. Homeward, the city lights blurred past, a river of gold, and in that quiet cocoon, tears came, not of loss, but release. The betrayal's blade had carved deep, but in the scars forming, I had found my outline anew, edges sharper, colors truer. The days after the verdict unfolded like the slow turning of pages in a book too long held closed, each one revealing passages I'd skimmed in haste. The restitution check arrived 2 weeks later, a crisp envelope from the court's clerk, its contents not just ink on paper, but a tangible reclaiming. $25,000 plus interest and penalties that swelled it to nearly 30, a sum Elena called poetic justice. I deposited it that afternoon, the bank teller's smile polite but distant, as if she sensed the weight beyond the numbers. Driving home, the autumn leaves swirled in eddies along the roadside, crimson and gold confetti for a parade I walked alone. The house welcomed me, with its familiar creaks, the scent of last night's chamomile lingering like a half-remembered dream. I didn't celebrate with wine or fanfare. Instead, I lit that vanilla candle on the mantel, its flame steady against the gathering dusk, and sat with a notebook, pen poised over blank lines. Gratitude first, Elena had advised during our final debrief, her office now a space of loose ends tied. List the freedoms you've won, Sophia, not the losses. So I did, the credit reports now pristine, alert silence like overzealous watchdogs stood down, the retirement fund replenished, its balance a quiet promise of those seaside mornings I'd envisioned. But deeper entries followed, inked with the timbre of fresh insight, the space in my chest where Carla's voice echoed, now echoing only my own, tentative at first, then bolder. I spoke my truth in that courtroom, I wrote, and the world did not end. It widened. The pen scratched on, filling pages with the raw ore of experience, the gaslight's dim, the narcissist's dance, the slow dawn of self-trust after decades in shadow. Mira noticed the shift in our next session, her eyes crinkling at the corners as I recounted the trial's close, the arrest's quiet click like a lock turning on a chapter sealed. We sat by the window again, winter's first frost etching lace on the panes, the lavender diffuser's hum a soft underscore to my words. You're not just surviving this, she observed, handing me a mug of ginger tea, its steam curling like question marks. You're alchemizing it. What comes next feels like creation. Creation. The word had hummed in the back of my mind since the jury's nod, a melody half-formed. Nights found me at the kitchen table, the laptop screen a portal to possibility, fingers flying over keys as I outlined chapters. The Willow's shadow, unraveling toxic ties after 50. It poured out not in fury, but in the measured cadence of a librarian curating truths. Stories woven from my scars, anonymized echoes from those forms that had steadied me, insights gleaned from Mira's books and Harlan's dossiers. I wrote of the idealization phase, that honeymoon of souls where laughter binds like honey, the devaluations creep, subtle as fog rolling in, turning compliments to barbs. The discard's blade, swift and sanitized as, it's not you, it's us. But threaded through was the rebirth. How betrayal's forge tempers the spirit, hammering fragility into fortitude. Drafts multiplied, folders blooming on my desktop like wildflowers after rain. Chapter 3, Gaslights and Gardens, exploring how manipulators till doubt like weeds in fertile soil. Chapter 7, The Solo Waltz, meditations on solitude not as punishment, but pilgrimage. I'd pause at dawn, stepping onto the porch with coffee in hand, the air crisp with wood smoke from neighbors' chimneys, and read aloud to the waking birds, my voice gaining strength with each stanza. Doubts nipped at the edges. Who am I to pin this? A 60-year-old shelver of others' tales, but Mira's refrain countered. Your life is the rarest book, Sophia, the one only you can author. The women's circle found me through a flyer pinned to the community board, its edges curling like an invitation from fate. Silver threads, empowerment for women over 50. I attended my first meeting on a snowy January evening, the community center aglow with strung lights that danced on fresh fallen flakes outside. The room smelled of cinnamon from a shared bake-sale table, oatmeal cookies studded with raisins, evoking mothers' kitchens and long-ago comforts, and held a dozen women, a tapestry of silver hair and knowing smiles, gathered in a circle of folding chairs that creaked under our collective weight. Lydia, the facilitator, was a retired teacher in her 70s, with laugh lines etched like beloved quotations, and a voice that wrapped around you like a quilt. We're here not to mend what's broken, but to celebrate the mosaics we've become. She began passing a talking stick carved from birch, smooth as river stone. Hands reached for it tentatively at first, mine among them. The wood warm from previous grips, and stories unfurled, divorces reclaimed as reinventions, children flown but nests refurnished with art and avocations, cancers battled and books authored in remissions light. When the stick came to me, its grain swirling under my thumb like whispered secrets, I spoke of Carla, not by name, but as the shadow that had lengthened my own. I said, she borrowed more than money. She borrowed my belief in goodness. But in losing that, I found my own compass. Nods rippled around, eyes glistening in the lamplight, and Marla, a widow with crocheted hooks perpetually in hand, reached over and squeezed my knee. Betrayal's the great teacher, dear. It shows us we're enough, just as we are.
Meetings became my anchor, twice monthly rhythms where we shared not just wounds but wonders, potlucks with recipes traded like treasures, field trips to galleries where we sketched nudes with pencils that smudged our laughter. Lydia introduced prompts. Write a letter to your younger self. And mine flowed fierce. Dearest girl under the willow, trust your quiet knowing. The anchors you seek, they're woven into your very bones. We read them aloud, voices overlapping in harmony, the room filling with the scent of Earl Grey and empowerment's subtle perfume. Spring thawed the world outside as my manuscript swelled, chapters stacking like bricks in a wall of witness. I queried agents via email, the send button a leap akin to that courtroom oath, heart pounding as if facing Carla's gaze anew. Rejections came gentle at first. Lovely voice, but markets tight. Each a pinprick I bandaged with circle pep talks. Then, in May's bloom and acceptance, a small press in Boston, run by women who'd worked similar paths, their email effusive. Your story sings the song we've all hummed in the dark. Let's light it for others. Editing sessions followed, virtual calls where my editor, a vibrant soul named Tessa in her late 50s, probed with kindness. Here, lean into the sensory. The rain on the window when you discovered the letters. Make us feel the unravel. Revisions flowed like river water, smoothing rough banks, until the galley proofs arrived in summer's heat, their pages warm from the press, smelling of fresh ink and possibility. The title settled as Threads Unraveled, Reclaiming Self from Toxic Bonds. Cover art, a willow silhouette against the dawn sky, branches reaching not in plea, but in praise. Launch night came in September. The library, my old domain, transformed with garlands of paper books dangling like mobiles, strings of lights casting golden pools on the circulation desk. 50 souls gathered, circle sisters in shawls knitted with love, Elena with a bottle of sparkling cider, Harlan in his best tweed, awkward but earnest. Mira emceed, her velvet voice introducing me as a woman who's turned ash to arrow. I read from the prologue, the words I'd inked in that post-verdict hush.
Betrayal doesn't end a story. It authors the next chapter in ink that's wholly yours. Questions followed, a tide of curiosity. How do you know when to walk away? I'd pause, stick in hand like our circle's talisman, and answer from the gut, when the cost to your peace exceeds the comfort of familiarity. Signings ensued, pens gliding over title pages, each inscription a small spell. May your threads hold true. By evening's close, stacks dwindled to singles, the air humming with conversation sparked, women exchanging cards, promising coffees, the ripple of one truth touching many shores. Emboldened, I turned outward, the world beckoning like an open atlas. Retirement loomed gentle now, the library's director waving me off with a cake iced in book spines, colleagues toasting to the author in aisle 3. My first trip was to Ireland, that emerald isle of storytellers, booked on a whim from the Restitution, a solo tour of cliffs and castles, the Atlantic's roar a balm to inner tempests. I wandered Dingle's winding lanes, salt wind tangling my hair, stopping at pubs where fiddles wailed and locals leaned in for tales. A book, you say? On friends turn foes, one elder murmured over Guinness foam, eyes twinkling. Ah, the heart's the trickiest plot. From there, Morocco souks, a riot of spices and silks, where I haggled for a lantern that glowed like captured moonlight, its brass etched with proverbs on endurance. In a Riyadh's courtyard, under stars thick as scattered salt, I journaled by its flame. The world is wider than one betrayal, deeper than one trust misplaced. India followed, the Ganges' muddy grace teaching surrender, ash-smeared sadhus nodding as I whispered prayers for Carla, not forgiveness forced, but release, a feather let loose on the current. Each journey etched lines on my map and soul, Patagonia's glaciers calving into fjords, thunderous reminders of impermanence, Kyoto's Zen gardens, raked sands mirroring the mind's slow rake toward peace. Back home in between, the circle swelled with my slides, projected on a sheet in Lydia's living room, tea steaming as we marveled. "You've become the light you lost," Marla said one night, her crochet needle pausing mid-stitch, hook glinting like a wand. Scars remained, of course, faint pulls and quiet moments, like scenes tested by wind. A phone ping from an unknown number once, and my breath would catch, half expecting her voice. But it was never. Carla faded into footnotes, her sentence a year in minimum security, probation laced with restitution payments that trickled like reluctant rain. Whispers reached me through mutuals. Therapy mandated, a sponsor assigned. Her Botox empire crumbled to apologies unreturned. I didn't seek her out. Some closures are solitary, written in the margins of one's own narrative. By winter's turn again, the book had found its wings, reviews in women's journals praising its heartfelt cartography of the soul, readings in city bookstores where crowds leaned close, hungry for hope. Royalties padded the fund, but the true wealth was letters, envelopes scented with lavender and resolve from readers my age and older. Your words named my silence. Thank you for the courage to speak. One evening, as snow hushed the world outside, I sat by the fire, its crackle a companionable murmur, the manuscript's final copy open on my lap. Pages turned slow, each a milestone, the hook of discovery's ache, the body of battle's forge, the close of wings unfurled. The circle had planned a solstice gathering, but tonight was mine alone, a ritual of reflection, chamomile steaming beside a plate of those oatmeal cookies, raisins plump as old affections. I traced the acknowledgments, inked with gratitude, Mira's steady gaze, Elena's fierce advocacy, the circle's woven warmth, Harlan's quiet grit. And at the end, a line for the girl under the willow, the woman in the courtroom, the traveler on cliff's edge. To the Sophia who trusted deeply and learned to trust deeper still in herself. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney like prayers loosed. Outside, the world slept under white, pure and unscarred. Inside, I closed the book, its weight light as a promise kept. Betrayal had stolen nothing irretrievable. It had merely cleared the shells for stories yet to untold. Winter's grip loosened grudgingly that year, the snow yielding to mud-slick paths that squelched underfoot like reluctant confessions. I marked the solstice with the circle, our gathering in Lydia's Victorian parlor a cocoon of candlelight and cordials, the air thick with the scent of pine boughs draped over the mantel and the sharp tang of mulled wine simmering on the sideboard. We exchanged not gifts wrapped in paper, but tokens of intent, polished stones etched with single words. Resilience, for me, slipped into my palm by Tessa, my editor, who joined us after a reading in the next town over. Its cool weight against my skin felt like a vow carved in quartz, a reminder that strength isn't shouted, but worn smooth. The fire crackled as we circled closer, chairs drawn into an intimate huddle, the flames casting flickering portraits on our faces, lines deepened by laughter and loss, eyes bright with the season's quiet magic. Lydia passed the talking stick once more, its birch grain now familiar as an old friend's palm, and when it reached me, I held it loosely, thumb tracing the whorls as if reading Braille secrets. The room stilled, breath sinking in that sacred pause, and I spoke of the travels not as triumphs, but as tender inquiries. The Irish cliffs where wind had whipped away the last echoes of Carla's gaslit doubts. The Moroccan lantern hung now in my hallway, its glow a nightly beacon against the dark. Each step, I said, voice threading soft through the warmth, was a question to the girl I was. What if the world beyond one betrayal holds symphonies yet unheard?
Marla nodded, her crochet project paused in her lap, hook dangling like a paused thought. "And did she answer?" she asked, her voice a gentle prod laced with the wisdom of 80 winters. I smiled, the fire's heat blooming on my cheeks. She did, in fragments, a fiddler's reel in dingle that matched the rhythm of my healing heart. The Ganges murmur reminding me that rivers carve canyons not in rage, but persistence. But the deepest echo? It came home with me, in the quiet of my own rooms. Pauses rippled, the stick warm now from my grip, and I passed it on, the circle's energy flowing like a shared pulse. That night, driving home through lanes dusted with moonlight, the stone in my pocket shifted with each curve, a subtle nudge toward the manuscript's next incarnation. The book had stirred ripples beyond readings, book clubs inviting me for evenings of wine and dissection, their questions probing like kindly surgeons. How do you forgive the unforgivable? I'd lean into the lamplight, glass stem cool between fingers, and answer from the marrow. Forgiveness isn't absolution for them. It's liberation for you. A key turned in your own lock. Letters accumulated on the hall table, a growing stack of envelopes with stamps from distant states, California's sun-bleached postmarks, Maine's fog-kissed ink, each one a lifeline tossed from similar storms. One, from a woman named Evelyn in Tucson, lingered longest. Your pages named the thief in my marriage, the one who stole not funds, but faith. I've left the stick. Now I learn to walk with my own. Spring unfurled then, tentative as a first green shoot, and with it came an invitation that tugged at the scar tissue, a literary festival in the city where Carla and I had once wandered museums on rainy Sundays, our umbrellas clacking like conspirators. The panel was titled Bonds Broken, Spirits Mended, a lineup of survivors turned scribes, and Tessa urged me, "Go, Sophia. It's not confrontation, it's culmination." I booked the train, the rhythm of rails a meditative click-clack that lulled old anxieties to sleep, the windows blur of fields and farms a canvas for reflection. The festival sprawled across a park alive with vendor tents and author booths, the air humming with espresso steam and the rustle of signing queues, spring blossoms perfuming the breeze like shy apologies. I arrived early, nerves fluttering like the monarchs migrating overhead, and settled into the green room, a converted gazebo with wicker chairs and a side table of bottled waters sweating condensation. Fellow panelists trickled in, a poet in her 40s with tattoos of sonnets curling her arms, a memoirist twice my age who'd outrun cult shadows. We traded war stories lightly, laughter a bridge over chasms, until the moderator, a brisk academic with a clipboard, herded us on stage. The tent swelled with attendees, folding chairs creaking under the press,
faces upturned like petals to sun, women, mostly, silvered and steadfast, clutching copies of our works like talismans. I sat second from the end, the microphone stem cold under my palm, and as introductions rolled, I scanned the crowd, half dreading, half hoping for a familiar silhouette. None appeared, but in the third row, a woman with Carla's sharp jawline caught my eye. Sister? Cousin? Her gaze intent, not unkind. The panel flowed, readings and voices rich with reclamation, questions lobbed like softballs. What role does community play? Answered in choruses. My turn came mid-flow, the moderator nodding my way, Sophia Hargrove, whose treads unraveled charts the quiet revolution of self-advocacy after betrayal. I rose, the chair sighing behind me, and stepped to the podium, its wood scarred from countless grips. Clearing my throat against the hush, I read from Chapter 9, The Echo Chamber's End. She was the echo I mistook for my own voice, her whispers shaping my silences, until the day the chamber cracked. In the fracture, I heard myself, not diminished, but amplified, a solo area rising from the ruins. The words hung, the tense canvas flapping gently in the breeze, carrying my voice to the edges. Applause followed warm as sunlight on skin, and questions zeroed in, a young mother asking about spotting red flags in friendships, an elder on rebuilding after decades. But the one that pierced came from the back, a voice reedy with age. What of the betrayer? Do they ever truly see the wreckage? I paused, the microphone feedback humming faint, an echo of old distortions. Some do, in time's rear view, therapy's mirror, consequences glare. Others, they remain architects of their isolation, building walls from borrowed bricks. But their seeing isn't my salvation. Mine lies in the seeing I've done, of my worth, unborrowed and unbound. Nods wove through the crowd, a tapestry of agreement. And as the session closed, signings beckoned, lines forming like rivers to my table. It was there, amidst the shuffle of pages and pens, that the woman from the third row approached, her copy clutched like a shield. Up close, she was no kin to Carla, just a stranger with echoes of resemblance, her eyes crinkling as she extended the book. That aria, she said, voice low, sang my sister's song. She took my savings for dreams that soured. Your words, they give me permission to sing mine. We talked then, brief but deep. Her name Ruth, a gardener who let weeds overrun her plot. And as I inscribed, to Ruth, may your blooms outshine the brambles. Tears pricked, not from pain, but the profound symmetry of shared survival. The train home that evening rocked me through twilight's palette, fields fading to indigo, the stone in my pocket now joined by a pressed flower from the park. A daisy, simple and defiant. Sleep came easy, dreams weaving not shadows, but sunlight through willow leaves, the branches parting to reveal paths untrodden. Summer deepened the rebirth then, the circle evolving into retreats, a weekend at a lakeside cabin, rented with pooled funds, where we canoed at dawn, paddles dipping silent into mist-shrouded water, the lap of waves a metronome for morning meditations. Lydia led us in rituals, letters to losses burned in a fire pit, their ashes stirred into the earth as fertilizer for wildflowers we'd plant come spring. Mine was to Carla, penned in the cabin's loft under a slanted ceiling beamed with pine. You taught me the shape of trust's fracture, but not its mending. For that, I thank the woman I became in the breaking. The paper curled in flames, orange tongues licking ink to vapor, and as it lifted on smoke, I felt the last tether snap, not with violence, but grace. From there, travels called again, this time with purpose. A speaking tour stitched across continents, the book's quiet success unfurling invitations like petals. Florence's cobbled streets, where I lectured in a villa overlooking the Arno, its waters murmuring below like ancient counselors. Tokyo's cherry blossoms, fleeting as forgiveness, where a women's collective hosted me in a tea house scented with matcha and resolve. In each, Audiences mirrored my circle, faces etched with stories unspoken, questions that bridged our divides. How do you trust again? I'd answer, voice steady as the podium's grain, by starting small. A nod to the stranger who holds the door, a call to the friend who listens without ledger. Trust rebuilds not in leaps, but in the daily grace of showing up for yourself. Yet the scars whispered, still, in unguarded moments. A cafe queue where laughter from a nearby table evoked her trill, sending a shiver down my spine like cool silk. A bookstore window displaying a new title on female friendships, its cover a pair of entwined hands that twisted the knife faint but familiar. These were the emotional truths that lingered, not as anchors, but as lighthouses, warnings and guides, illuminating the coast I'd charted anew.
Fall returned with harvest bounty, the circle hosting a reweaving workshop in the library's auditorium, my old haunt, now a venue for my triumphs. We gathered under banners of hand-dyed silk, tables laden with looms and yarns and earth tones, Lydia demonstrating the shuttle's pass. Each thread a choice, past, present, future, woven not to hide the knots, but to honor them. I took up the warp, fingers clumsy at first on the heddles, but gaining rhythm as colors bloomed, crimson for rageous fire, indigo for grief's depth, gold for the dawn that followed. My tapestry grew modest, a wall hanging destined for the cabin wall, its pattern a willow stylized, roots delving deep into soil veined with silver scars. As needles clicked around me, stories surfaced. Marla's yarn of a daughter reclaimed after years estranged. Tessa's tread of career crossroads navigated solo. Mine woven the trial's amber light, the train's click-clack, the burn of that letter, each pass a reclamation, the loom's hum a hymn to endurance. By the year's wane, the book claimed a quiet accolade, a regional award for inspirational nonfiction, presented at a gala and a hall aglow with chandeliers that dripped light like honey. I stood on stage, gown of emerald silk whispering against my skin, the statuette heavy in my hands, brass and glass, etched with voice of the unseen. My acceptance murmured of the women who'd shaped the words. To those whose scars are stories untold, know this, your silence was never empty. It was the space where strength was spun. Home again, the house felt not hollow, but hallowed. A sanctuary of shelves bowed with volumes loved and lived, the mantel crowded with tokens, the Moroccan lantern, Irish pebble, pressed daisy, framed beside the award. Winter's eve found me there, snow tapping the panes like insistent fingers, a journal open to a fresh page. The circle's next gathering loomed, but tonight was introspection's vigil, fire crackling as I penned the coda to my unwritten sequel. The willow bends, but does not break. Its roots, unseen, hold the storm. As the new year dawned, crisp and unyielding, with frost silvering the window panes like delicate filigree, I found myself drawn back to the willow, the very one from our girlhood secrets, standing sentinel now in the schoolyard overgrown into a park of memory. The city had changed around it, high-rises piercing the sky like ambitious fingers, traffic humming a ceaseless underscore to the quiet pulse of lives unfolding. But the tree endured, its branches sweeping low in a verdant curtain, roots clutching the earth with the tenacity of old promises kept. I arrived at twilight, the air sharp with the scent of damp bark and distant wood smoke, my boots sinking soft into the leaf-littered path that wound from the parking lot. In my coat pocket, the talking stick from the circle rested, its birch smooth from countless hands, a bridge between then and now. The bench beneath the willow was weathered, slats grayed by rains uncounted, but I settled onto it with the ease of returning home. The wood cooled through my woolen slacks, snow flurries danced tentative in the fading light, catching on lashes and tongue like fleeting thoughts, and I closed my eyes, letting the hush envelop me. Memories rose unbidden, not as floods, but as gentle swells. Carla at 9, her braids whipping as she climbed the trunk, calling down challenges I met with trepidation, my palms scraped raw on the bark, but heart alight with her daring. Us at 16, sprawled in the grass after curfew, sharing dreams whispered against the night, hers of stages and spotlights, me of libraries vast as oceans, shelves brimming with worlds we'd conquer side by side. Those were the threads I had mourned most fiercely, the pure weave before the warp of want twisted them awry. A rustle pulled me from reverie.
the crunch of gravel under hesitant steps, and I opened my eyes to see a figure approaching, bundled in a scarf that trailed like a banner of truce. Not Carla, but close enough to stir the embers. Her younger sister, Elise, whom I'd known peripherally through family holidays, her face a softer echo of that once-beloved profile, lines etched not by surgery, but by the unfiltered passage of time. She paused at the path's edge, hands buried in mittens, breath clouding to chill, and when our gazes met, hers held a fragility that mirrored my own hidden fractures. "Sophia," she said, voice muffled by wool but warm with recognition, stepping closer until the willow's drape framed us both. "I hoped I'd find you here. The festival, Ruth told me you'd be in town, and this place, it felt right." She unwound her scarf slightly, revealing cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes shadowed with the weight of unspoken burdens. We hadn't spoken since the trial's echo, her brief testimony on Carla's patterns, a quiet brick in my wall of evidence, delivered with a sister's reluctant precision. I gestured to the bench's empty span, the wood groaning softly as she sat, the space between us a buffer of breath and bygone loyalties. Snow continued its lazy descent, blanketing the ground in hush, and for a moment we sat in companionable silence, the willow's branches sighing overhead like a collective exhale. She pulled a thermos from her bag, unscrewing the lid to release a plume of cinnamon-spiced hot chocolate, the kind we'd sipped at those holidays, marshmallows bobbing like buoys in the dark tide of family tensions. She said, "I brought this. Old habit." She poured into 2 tin mugs, the metal clinking faint, and handed one over, its warmth seeping through my gloves like a tentative olive branch. We sipped in tandem, the sweetness cutting the cold, and she began, voice threading slow through the quiet. "Carla, she's out. Early release. Good behavior. The program's mandatory. Counseling, restitution logs she has to sign like penance. She's changed her number, moved to a studio on the edge of town, works part-time at a thrift store, sorting donations like puzzles she can't solve." Elise's gaze drifted to the tree, tracing a branch that curved like a question mark. "She asked about you in letters that I didn't answer at first. Wanted to know if you'd found peace in the telling." My mug paused midway, the chocolate's heat blooming against my palm, a counterpoint to the sudden tightness in my chest. Peace. The word evoked mirror sessions, the circle's looms, the world's vast canvas I'd inked with my steps. But hearing it tied to her after the courtroom's amber verdict and the burn of that lakeside letter stirred sediments long settled, a grief not for the thief, but for the girl who'd once climbed willows with abandon. "And what did you tell her?" I asked, voice steady as the trunk beside us, though my heart tripped like a skipped stitch. Elise turned then, her eyes meeting mine with a clarity born of fractures mended crooked. "That peace isn't hers to claim. Not anymore. But that you'd woven something beautiful from the unraveling." She read the book, in secret I think, hidden under her mattress like contraband, cried through the chapters on Gaslight, said it named the hunger she'd never admitted. Narcissism, the experts called it. But to her, it was just
survival. Always chasing the next light to outrun her shadows. A pause, heavy with the unsaid, and she reached into her pocket, drawing out a folded letter, its edges worn from handling. She wrote this. For you. No expectations, just her side, or what's left of it. The paper trembled slightly in her grasp, cream stalk creased from the thermos's weight, and I took it with fingers that knew the chill of old wounds reopening. The script was hers, familiar loops and leans, though shakier now, stripped to flourish. Dearest Soph, it began, ink bleeding faint where tears had fallen. 40 years, and I spent them borrowing your shine to mask my dim. The willow remembers us better than I do, innocent, entwined. I can't undo the theft, the lies that lined up like dominoes, like toppled for a fleeting high. The surgeon's knife, the cruise's salt air, they were elixirs for a soul gone hollow, but they poisoned the one thread that held me whole, you. In the cell's gray, your book found me, pages turning like accusations I finally heard. I'm learning the shape of sorry, not words, but work. 12 steps, amends, unpaid. If forgiveness is a door, I've no key, but I'll stand outside, hoping the wind carries my whisper. I see you now, truly, the anchor I lost. Carla. The words blurred, not from snow, but from the swell behind my eyes, a tide of compassion unbidden, laced with the sorrow of what might have been. I folded it carefully, tucking it beside the talking stick, the paper's edge brushing wood like a sigh. Thank you, Elise, for this, for bridging what she couldn't. We sat then, mugs emptying as dusk deepened to navy, stars pricking through the branches like tentative fireflies. Stories flowed between us, not of blame, but bridges. Her own mending with Carla, tentative teas over thrift store finds, my travels treasures, the lantern's glow in Moroccan nights, the Ganges lesson in letting go. When the cold nipped insistent, we rose, arms linking loose as we traced the path back, the willow silhouette a guardian at our backs. At the lot, Elise hugged me fierce, her scarf tangling with mine, the scent of cinnamon clinging like a benediction. Heel wide, Sophia. The world's kinder to those who do. Her taillights faded into the night, red winks swallowed by the dark, and I lingered, breath fogging the air, the letter's weight a talisman in my pocket. Home called through the weave of highways, the radio murmuring ballads of lost loves reclaimed. And I arrived to the house's embrace, its lamps aglow like welcoming arms. The fire I kindled that night burned long, flames leaping high as I unpacked the evening, not in journal, but aloud, voice echoing off walls that held my solitude like a sacred trust. The circle gathered the next day, snow-shrouded in Lydia's parlor, and I shared the letter's essence, not the words verbatim, but the heart. A betrayer's glimpse of grace, fragile as first frost. Nods circled, tears tracing paths unchecked, Marla's hook stilled as she whispered, "Even thorns bloom, given time." Spring followed swift that year, the world erupting in verdant fury, crocuses thrusting through snow's remnants, birdsong a raucous choir at dawn. My book tour extended, invitations cascading like petals, a TED-style talk in Vancouver, rain-lashed windows framing fjords as I spoke of the architecture of after, rebuilding from betrayal's blueprint. The stage lights warmed my skin, the audience a sea of faces hungry for hope, and in the Q&A, a question pierced. What if the ending isn't tidy? What if the scars itch eternal? I paused, the microphone's hum a soft ally, and answered from the marrow. Then honor the itch. It's the body's memory reminding you of the bend that didn't break. Endings aren't closures. They're invitations to begin again, scars and all. Summer wove its spell in the circle's retreat, this time to the coast, a weathered cottage perched on dunes, waves crashing eternal below like applause for persistence. We walked beaches at low tide, bare feet sinking into wet sand that yielded cool and forgiving, collecting shells veined with purple and pearl, each a metaphor mirror-coaxed, hollow yet whole, echoes of storms weathered. Evenings around driftwood fires, sparks ascending like prayers. We shared not just stories but songs, Lydia's guitar strumming folk tunes of resilient women, voices joining ragged but rich. Mine cracked on the chorus of "The Water is Wide," tears salting the smoke, the ocean's roar drowning my quiet sobs for the girl who trusted without tally. One dawn, I slipped away alone, the cottage slumbering behind, and followed the tide pool's gleam, water glass clear over anemones waving tentative fronds. A crab scuttled sideways, shell barnacled with travels, and I knelt, breath sinking with the lap of waves, fingers trailing the surface where fresh water met salt. Here, the letter's echo resurfaced, not as burden, but buoyancy. Carla's whisper, "I see you now," intertwined with Elise's hug, the circles weave, the world's wide welcome. Betrayal's scar pulled faint,
a reminder not of loss, but latitude, the space to choose my light, unborrowed. Fall gilded the leaves once more, the book claiming shelves in airports and independence, its spine cracked open on trains and terraces, strangers' underlines tracing my truths like kinship. Royalties funded whims, a donation to the library's literacy program, scholarships for women over 50 chasing degrees deferred, a conservatory for the Willow Park, plaque reading, "In honor of roots that hold." The circle formalized, Silver Threads Collective, our logo a stylized loom with threads in rainbow span, meetings spilling into mentorships, guiding younger women through their own unravels, a legacy looped forward. Winter's vigil came gentle, the house a haven of holiday quiet, no obligatory gatherings, but chosen ones. Elena and Harlan over eggnog spiked with stories, Mira gifting a leather-bound journal etched, "Your next chapter." The eve of the year's turn, I walked the neighborhood luminous with lights, snow falling fat and silent, each flake a fresh page. Pausing under a street lamp's halo, the letter slipped from my pocket, landing soft on the drift below. I didn't retrieve it. Instead, I watched it blur white, ink surrendering to the pure, the wind carrying its essence away like a final exhale. Back inside, the fire awaited, chamomile steaming beside the talking stick, now retired to the mantel beside the award and lantern. I settled into the armchair's embrace, its cushions molded to my form like an old lover's hold, and opened the journal, pen gliding over vellum and script steady and sure. No plot this time, no arc of ache to ascent, just presence, the now of a woman 61, scars silvered to wisdom, heart a garden tilled deep. The clock chimed midnight distant, bells tolling not endings, but ever afters. Outside, the world renewed, blank and boundless. Inside, I closed my eyes, the fire's warmth a cradle, and whispered to the girl under the willow, the woman in the courtroom, the traveler on endless roads. We made it through the storm. And oh, the stars we see now. Sometimes, healing isn't about erasing the map of hurts etched on your skin. It's about tracing them with fingers that know at last the beauty in their lines. In those lines, you find not just survival, but the story's most luminous turn, the one where you become both author and light, forever your own.